Hello ladies, thank you very much for inviting me into your homes to give me the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about ballet. Now I may have been to some of your groups already and talked to you about my time in ballet, perhaps about costume making or perhaps about ballet in general. But this is just a short taster to give you an idea of the breadth of the subject of ballet and a little bit about history. Not very much, but bite size. So here we have the Royal Opera House. Many of you will have been there. Many of you will have perhaps had a backstage tour. A beautiful theatre with a plush interior. I've only been fortunate enough to have a seat in the orchestra stalls once because it's very expensive, I'm sure you know. But of course, it's not the only famous opera house in the world. One of the other most famous ones is the Bolshoi Theatre in Moscow. And so it's interesting to note that the Bolshoi Theatre in Moscow was actually started by an English impresario, and he used orphans from a nearby orphanage to people his performances. So the young men and women went in to perform in the theatre, but it wasn't really the cradle of ballet in Russia, because that was actually at the Imperial Theatre and the Imperial School in St. Petersburg, which of course now is the Mariinsky Theatre. It's changed its name several times during history, depending on the politics in Russia at the time, but of course now it is the Mariinsky. But it was from the Mariinsky and the Imperial School that many of the most famous names of ballet came, and it was really from there that ballet was really brought into the West. I'm not going back as far as Italy and the Sun King, but that's another story. So the Bolshoi Theatre. But of course, that won't be a lot of your memories of ballet. Perhaps some of you have got vivid memories of ballet as a child. This was perhaps your vision of ballet when as a child. It certainly was mine. Beautiful women in the corps de ballet wearing lovely white tutus. But of course, perhaps the reality was slightly different. Now, I love this photograph. I'm not actually in it. My sister is. I was in that school show, the only school show I was in as a child. But I just love that because if we look at the faces of those behind the two main characters, we can see a variety of emotions. Boredom, resentment. I think there's a bit of method acting going on there. There's a girl with her eyes closed because they're all wearing night dresses and pyjamas, although they seem to be doing a maypole dance. I don't really remember the story, but one girl studiously looking at her fingernails. But I'm sure that when we were wanted to be brownies, our mothers used to say to us, okay, well, you can go for 3 or 4 weeks before I buy the uniform. And of course, if we didn't like it, then the uniform wasn't bought. But maybe even after 5 or 6 weeks, we thought, well, actually, I didn't really want to be here, but the uniform's bought, I've got to go. And perhaps that was the same with the ballet lessons, because some of those girls certainly don't look as if they're enjoying themselves very much. So back to the beginnings of how ballet came into the West in the form that it's in at the moment. Some of the names that I'm going to mention you will be familiar with, and others maybe you won't. Now, this is the funeral of Enrico Pettet. He was an Italian dancer of Italian parents. He went on to teach at the Imperial School in St. Petersburg after he had finished his dancing career. Now, he was a teacher to so many famous names of dancers that went on to dance with Diaghilev's Ballet Russe, and Diaghilev brought ballet to the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. But here he is, fated almost like a pop star. One of the most famous dancers that came out of the Imperial School was Anna Pavlova. I'm sure that there won't be one of you that has not heard of her. So here she is with her pet swan, in her swan costume, and of course as a fashion icon. Now, she came out of the Imperial School. She had been a pupil of Enrico Pettet. She came out of the Imperial School and danced briefly with Diaghilev's Ballet Russe. But she then went on to form her own company, and with her own company travelled all over the world. And there's not a continent that Anna Pavlova did not visit in her quest to take ballet to everyone. And of course, as such, she did influence a great number of dancers who went on to become foremost names in ballet as we know it today. Another very famous name, Vaslav Nijinsky, and also the woman here is Tamara Karsavina. Now, many of you will have heard of Nijinsky, but maybe not of Tamara Karsavina. Now, here he is with Tamara in La Spectre de la Rose, his most famous role. He was really very famous for leaping very high, quite a small man. But his dancing career was very short. He was a dancer with the Ballet Russe. He was Diaghilev's lover, and then he had the temerity to get married, and Diaghilev sacked him. So he briefly formed his own company and travelled a bit with his own company, but it wasn't very successful. And unfortunately, in the parlance of the time, he lost his mind. More contemporary interviews with his daughter, for example, shed some light on his illness, and it was believed that he was actually schizophrenic. So in the early days, some of these costumes attracted, some of these costumes were designed by, for example, the one in the middle was designed by Picasso. The programme on the right was a design by Henri Matisse. Diaghilev attracted a great number of artists and musicians, so Stravinsky, for example, as well as Picasso and Ernst Bakst for a lot of the set design as well as the costume design. So, again, some of the work was very avant-garde, and particularly if you consider some of the costumes that are used now, these ones were really quite striking for their designs. So Diaghilev also died quite a young man. Now, the Ballet Russe never actually performed in Russia itself, and they went on after his death in various different guises and different names under the auspices of other artistic directors, but never had quite the same effect as the original Ballet Russe at the beginning of the 20th century. And again, here you see his funeral cortege very much fated as a almost, as I say, like a pop star. Other famous names that came out of the Imperial School and also then into the Ballet Russe, although I have to say that on the left is Ninette de Valois. She did not dance at the Imperial School, but she did dance with Diaghilev. He invited her into the company when she was quite young. And on the right we have Marie Rambert. Now, she went on to form a more contemporary style of dance, but both of them initially danced with Serge Diaghilev, and as we know, Ninette de Valois was the founder of what was later to become the Royal Ballet. And of course, the most famous name perhaps of the Royal Ballet is Margot Fonteyn. Here we see her as Aurora in the Sleeping Beauty, and then as Firebird. She was about to retire when Rudolf Nureyev defected from Russia, and it was his ambition to dance with Nureyev, with Fonteyn, I beg your pardon, and of course they were to become one of the most famous dance pairs that the world has ever seen, and she danced on until she was in her 60s. A beautiful, beautiful pairing of dancers. More famous names, household names. Darcy Bustle, of course, a lot of young people who watched Strictly didn't realise that she was actually a prima ballerina before she joined the television show. And here we have Carlos Acosta. This is from the Prince of Pagodas. She became a prima ballerina of the Royal Ballet at the age of 21, and she became the muse of Kenneth Macmillan, who was the artistic director at the time, and he had taken over from Frederick Ashton. Frederick Ashton, who was the artistic director at the Royal Opera House for many, many years, had seen Anna Pavlova dancing when she toured to South America, and it was Anna Pavlova's influence that brought Ashton into dance. Now, Frederick Ashton was a very, very famous choreographer. He had been a dancer, of course, in his time, and Kenneth Macmillan also had been a dancer but suffered badly with stage fright and went on to become a choreographer. Some of his work, though, could be quite dark. The ballet has moved on and gone into strange ways. Now, just because you can do something like that, to me, doesn't mean to say that you should do it. And I find it really quite awkward and ungainly, and it doesn't hold much enjoyment or pleasure for me. But of course, there are other people who do enjoy it. And in some respects, some of these photographs that proliferate on the internet are almost soft porn. This young woman, for example, does not look at all happy in that particular pose, and I have to ask myself the question of why. Not particularly attractive, she doesn't look comfortable, she's got lovely feet, but I'm not quite sure what the purpose of it is, as I say. But it's not just the women that pose in like this, it's also the men. Now, this is Stephen McRae, as I say, showing off his body, and I'm okay. Why, perhaps, is not the right question to ask, but not to my particular taste. But this man is the most stunning, accomplished dancer that perhaps I have ever seen perform on the stage. And the next slide shows you in a work by Kenneth Macmillan. Now this is Marion. Very dark, as I said, Kenneth Macmillan's work in a lot of instances. And this was based on a real life story. So here he is as Prince Ferdinand, who was obsessed with death. He was a drug addict, so the ballet features prostitutes, drug addiction, and in the end, suicide and murder. Very, very dark, but an absolutely stunning choreography. And Stephen McRae here and Natalie Osipova perform the work absolutely brilliantly. Ballet has its lighter side as well, of course. Now this is quite an old photograph with Shirley MacLaine in the middle of the corps de ballet with the Ballet Trocadero de Monte Carlo. Now this is a particular ballet company that is all men. They have been dancing all over Europe and America for very many years, and very, very accomplished dancers, always in drag. And here they are in a more recent photograph. There's always humour in the work that they perform. If you get the chance to see them, if they're on tour in this country, I would recommend that you go along. As I say, humour, but very accomplished dancers, always on point. Plenty of pastiches of Swan Lake and that kind of thing, but highly recommended, highly amusing. Contemporary dance, again, not my particular scene, but this is a piece performed by the American Ballet Theatre, and it's by Merce Cunningham. Quite disjointed. Very often I find the music to be disjointed as well, but of course it is very popular. So whichever kind or genre of dance that you like, there's something out there for you. But no one more than Matthew Bourne has brought dance and ballet to the forefront of popular entertainment. So he has performed the trilogy, created the trilogy of the Tchaikovsky ballets, so Swan Lake, Nutcracker here, and also Sleeping Beauty, where he had vampires instead of fairies. Now here we see the Kingdom of the Sweets, and clearly they're licorice all sorts, and he has managed to bring a whole new audience into the theatre to see ballet. Some of his early work are very amusing. This particular piece, the male dancers were shielded the whole time by bath sheets, and their valets moved about the stage with them. Now, I don't know whether they were wearing anything underneath the bath sheets, but having seen some of Matthew Vaughan's other works, I'm pretty sure that they were absolutely naked underneath there. Now, a lot of men find ballet difficult, perhaps they don't understand it, but a lot of men have difficulty with men in tights. So this slide is just for the men. No tights, just their Y fronts and their long johns and their vests. So this was an early piece where Matthew Vaughan is really making a pastiche about advertising and how men are portrayed. Some of his early work, very, very amusing. But behind the scenes, of course, there's a lot of work that goes on, a lot of construction, and this is the Bob and Tamar Manoukian workshop at the Royal Opera House facility in Perfleet. Perhaps many of you will have been there. I always recommend when I give my talks that people go down there and have a look to see what actually goes on backstage. So the creation of the flats, the construction of those will be carried out in the workshop at Perfleet to transform the stage into a villa in a village, sorry, not a villa, a village in Spain, as here in Don Quixote. I did mention earlier those by Leon Bakst and also by Picasso. I say very, very avant-garde costumes, considering these were for the early 20th century, particularly as well when you consider that some of the costumes that are worn now are very, very traditional and almost staid by comparison. The Royal Opera House facility at Perfleet, storage of costumes, storage of tutus, and of course there is the template for the knickers for a tutu. Some things you might not expect to see there: ties, weird shoes, and of course beautiful costumes. It's really, really worthwhile, and I do recommend, if you get the opportunity, to go. Even if you've already been once, give it another go, because you never know what they're going to be constructing. Anyway, thank you for listening, ladies, and I hope to see you all in the not too distant future. Stay well, take care, bye bye.